This is the fifth forum for City Council candidates. We'll be having several more weeks with 2 forums per week to assure that we fit every candidate in. This is an educational series of forums. Welcoming you is the Southgate Women's Group. We're sponsoring these forums. By the way, I was talking with a friend this afternoon, and we both had experience voting for candidates that we knew nothing about. We both felt pretty bad about those past experiences, but we won't be in that predicament in this election for City Council of Palo Alto, and I hope you won't be either. Tonight we hear from Greg Tanaka, but first let me introduce our moderator, Jeanette Kiesling.
Thank you very much, Freda, for that awesome introduction. You're absolutely right. A lot of people have told me the very same thing, that so far they've made their choices based on signs that they've seen in the gardens, posted in the gardens. So we have no more excuse. Now we can actually meet every city council candidate, and I'm very happy to have Councilman Greg Tanaka here tonight. You're actually the first sitting council member on our forum, and we're welcome to this platform. As with all the other fora, we keep all the participants muted, so you're welcome to post your questions in the chat. As you know, the chat function is in the middle of the bottom of your page. Just hover over with your cursor and you find an icon that gets you there. You can both post your questions directly to me, and I will read them to Greg without giving your name, or you can just post it in the everyone function, and then everyone will see your question right away. So I'm going to do a very brief introduction of Councilman Tanaka, and then hand over to him to introduce himself and hopefully tell us a little bit more about his policies. Councilman Tanaka, you have been a council member since, city council member since 2017. And you were in several committees, the City Council Finance Committee from 2017 to 18, and also currently, I believe. You've been a member on the Policy and Services Committee in 2019, and a member of the Rail Committee in 2019, and I'm sure we're gonna have a lot of questions for you on that one when we come to the Great Separation topics. Before being a City Council member, you were a chair and a commissioner of the Planning and Transportation Commission, where you championed the California Avenue Streetscape project, which led to widened sidewalks and created more parking space. Outside of City Council, you're a tech entrepreneur. You're the CEO and founder of Pecolata, a company which helps retailers optimize their retail sales teams. I hope I got that right. And
you got it right.
In your time, maybe you can tell us how you juggle both, being the CEO of a tech company and a city council member. So this is some of the background, but what I found more interesting about you is the reputation you built for yourself in the past 4 years on city council. According to Palo Alto Online, you have been called the council's dissenter-in-chief, often being the sole dissenter on expenditures that your colleagues view as routine, such as utility contracts and street repairs. You were the only dissenting vote on the city's 2019 decision to pursue a business tax, and one of 2 council members who voted against the budget that the council approved in June, and which cut about 40 million in expenditures. You have been called the city council's most vocal fiscal hawk, and in turn, you have accused your colleagues of having no backbone to stick to the budget. Looks like we're in for an interesting evening. So I would like to hand over to you now for about 5 to 10 minutes to talk more about yourself, and ideally comment on some of these statements. For example, whether or not you think they're true. And as a current city council member, you not only can tell us what you hope to achieve when you're re-elected, but you can also tell us about what, in fact, you did or did not get accomplished in the last 4 years. Try to be as specific as you can in your answers, and without further ado, let me hand over to you.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you, Freda, thank you, Jeanette, and thank you everyone for taking time out of your evening to chat with me. I love these kind of neighborhood meetings. So let me, I think Jeanette gave kind of like a nice bio on me, but let me give you a little bit more about my background. And this will probably give you better insight as to my thinking. So I didn't grow up in Palo Alto. I actually grew up down in Southern California, in a much poorer area than Palo Alto. You know, I had a single parent growing up. My dad didn't finish high school, so we were quite poor growing up. And that's probably why from the fiscal side, I'm always very conscious about the budget and trying to make sure that we spend our money wisely. So it's kind of something that's rather central to myself. And I believe in, you know, that with the right kind of education, you go quite far. So while my dad never finished high school, you know, I went off to Caltech in Berkeley, you know, became a chunk entrepreneur, worked at lots of different companies, and I live here in Palo Alto, which, you know, from where I started, I never imagined. So I'm incredibly grateful to be here and to be serving on city council. And I got involved in civic activities in College Terrace. So I live in College Terrace. I became president of my neighborhood association. And kind of the projects that we worked on was one, traffic calming. So when I moved to Palo Alto, my kids were really small at the time, and I was worried about cut-through traffic. So one of the first things I did as president was implement a traffic calming program where we got speed humps or speed tables and roundabouts and stuff just to try to calm the traffic, which I think largely we did. And then the other big issue, and I think this is something that the Southgate neighborhood also experienced a year or so ago, a few years ago, I guess, was parking intrusion. So we had businesses from El Camino, we had Facebook at the time, we had Stanford University, where people would park in our neighborhood, and it kind of reached a boiling point, especially when Facebook was here. So one of the programs I helped lead forward is the residential permanent parking program. In fact, it was the very first one in our city, and eventually became the template. So when the Southgate, I guess you guys had some medical offices, and there's some intrusion of parking from some of the medical offices. When that happened, that's something which I don't know if any of you guys were at the council meeting or watched what happened, but it was something that I took pretty seriously, and I think I had a big part in trying to help resolve, which I think right now is not an issue anymore. But so I definitely understand the perspective from the neighborhood, so that's how I got my start. Right, was working on some of these projects. I think you talked a little bit about some of the stuff that I did on Planning Commission. On council, one of the big things I worked on early on in the first half of my term is actually pension reform. So one of the big things that wasn't happening before I was on council was our unfunded pension liabilities wasn't really being accounted for or fully accounted for. So we, would promise pensions and we would pay employees, but we would not necessarily account for the debt we owed them, right? Which isn't necessarily good, because you don't know what kind of fiscal burden there's going to be. But the second thing is we weren't necessarily putting money aside for it. And so in the first half of my term, and I know some of you might watch a lot about city councils, but I was pretty vigilant about that and successful in getting both, in terms of accounting for the pension liabilities as well as getting them funded. So I'm quite proud of that fact. I was able to rally my fellow council members to support this. So I think that was something that I'm quite proud of. And then the other part is I think there's been, since the time I've been at College Terrace, there's been a bunch of other residential permanent park programs that have been approved. So I've helped support those. And most recently, some of the things I've been most proud of is, so as Jeanette mentioned, my company works on doing retail analytics for physical retailers. So I know a lot about retail, a lot about restaurants, and I hold regular office hours. In fact, some of you actually attend my office hours, and I appreciate that. So I've been holding office hours every Sunday since I've been elected in 2017, from 2 to 4. And anyone who wants to talk more in more depth than we get a chance here now is welcome to do that. And it's open. I basically will talk to anyone about anything, so nothing's off limits. And if you guys, anyone wants to see some of the, for the ones that people are okay with making public, we stream it live to our Facebook page and YouTube. So you guys can go there and you'll see hundreds and hundreds of office hours that we've held on just about every single topic you think of. So I think I'm the only councilman that does that, because I really do believe in transparency. And but recently, kind of my background around retail and restaurants, I've been holding a lot of office hours with a lot of the small business owners on Cal Lab and University, and I've been hearing about the struggles, right, starting in March. And so, I've been, so I think, Jeanette, I have two kids, right? So I have one daughter at Green and another son at Palo, and I work full time, so it's quite busy. And so I also have to ask myself, well, should I do this again? And kind of the thing that for me kind of put it over the edge is a couple of things. So the first thing is, I think a lot of you know that we were going through a pandemic-induced recession, right? Probably one of the deepest recessions since the Great Depression. You look at our GDP; it's fallen like a rock. A lot of restaurants and retailers are closing. There's some projections out there that 50 to 60% of them will never open again. So it's quite dire. So one of the things I pushed for and was successful is the opening of Cal Ave University Avenue, which was to block some parts of it to allow the restaurants to get space, because with the pandemic, you're not allowed to have indoor dining. And so by allowing the restaurants to expand onto the street, they're able to have a chance of surviving, because just doing ticket alone is really, really hard to survive. So that's one of the things I pushed for and was successful in rallying my fellow council members to do. The other thing that I was successful in is small business grants. So even before the pandemic, a lot of these restaurants and retailers were hanging by the skin of their teeth. And so one of the things that I pushed for was the small business grant program. And it's been incredibly successful. So I've got um, a lot of kudos and thanks from a lot of the retailers and restaurants. And if you go to my website, you'll see that I have like almost 300 endorsements, which is about 3 times more than I think my nearest competitor. I think my nearest competitor has like 90. So one of the reasons is because I've done a lot to try to help the people in the city, as well as a lot of the small businesses, and that's earned me quite a few endorsements. So anyway, so I was successful in pushing through the small business grant program, and I'm glad to say that there's some retailers and restaurants are able to survive because of that, and I'm grateful that the program worked. So one of the big reasons why I'm running is because I looked at this this incredible recession, all this COVID impacts that we've been having from the sheltering in place. Like, it's a shame that we're not actually meeting in someone's living room, right? We're all meeting on Zoom, and so it's really changing life. This is maybe the new normal for maybe longer than any of us expect, unfortunately, and it's impacting our businesses quite heavily. And I think my background working with retailers, so I saw this issue with retailers early on, which is one of the reasons why I was the first to kind of jump on this and push it really hard. As I think I'm probably one of the best positioned, if not the best positioned, to actually help with the recovery plan, in terms of trying to figure out how do we get back on track with all these small local businesses. So that's one of my big motivations. I felt that to walk away now would not be good for the community, and it was kind of my duty to really help out with that. And so one of my big motivations for running again is to apply my knowledge about this industry to actually help our city, to help make sure that the small local businesses that we have here are able to continue and provide the services that people in our city expect. So that's one thing. But the second thing is, and it goes back to my intro, right? I never dreamed I'd live in a place like Palo Alto, right? I mean, we were living in government housing. We were really broke growing up, right? I didn't realize how broke I was until I lived in Palo Alto, and we're blessed to have all the amenities we have in our city. But where I grew up, it wasn't like that at all. It was pretty down tough. And uh, the thing that I think is different now versus was like, let's say in 2020 or for the past 10 years previously, was we were in probably one of the biggest bull runs in American history. In fact, I think it is the biggest bull run. They say it's like it's the greatest economic expansion in the history of the country over 200 years. And um, so we're going from one of the greatest expansion periods where money was just pouring into the city, never have to worry about revenue. Any program you wanted, we could spend money on, to almost like day and night switch to now things are incredibly constrained, right? Things are we just from our general fund, right? Which is our general fund's only a small part of our overall fund, right? Our overall budget is like $700 something million. Our general fund's only like $220 something million. Our general fund, just just a small piece of the overall budget, revenue dropped $40 million, right? And it may drop more because a lot of the hotels can't open up, a lot of the retailers, aren't doing well. So there's lots of issues going on. And I've always been very fiscally conscious just because of my background, because like I know what it's like to live like paycheck to paycheck, and so I'm not frivolous. I mean, even for myself personally, I drive an old car, I ride an old bike. I don't spend a lot of money personally myself just because of how I grew up, and so for the city's money, I kind of spend it as if it's my own. I don't waste it. I hate when there's waste. I mean, I know the city wanted to pay $300,000 for a solo calculator, and to me that's just outrageous. When you can go to Google and type solo calculator and get it for free, right? Or they want to spend $1 million on utility bill graphics, right? This is after we laid off 70 people and we cut, the children's theater, we cut, $3 million from our schools. And to me, that's unconscionable, right? To be spending taxpayer money when we're laying off people, when people here can't pay their rent, they can't pay their mortgage, to be spending money on marketing graphics for utility bills is outrageous, does not make sense. Or for the city manager to get a $3-4 million house when we're laying off people. The night that we approved this house, when we're also laying off people, like what kind of tone deafness is that, right? Like, first of all, no other city gives a $3-4 million house to a city manager. And if you're doing it on the night where we're actually like laying people off, to me, it's just unconscionable, right? We have one of the largest city manager's office, 10 people. I mean, we're the size of San Francisco, San Jose, but our city is like, we're a fraction of the size. So like for me, I feel really strongly on this. And as you guys probably know, like I think they call me the leading fiscal hawk, and I rail about this all the time. But my upbringing of being fiscally conscious, right, to have sensible spending in a time of constrained economic resources, to me is probably more important now than ever, because we don't have endless revenue pouring in. We don't have the amount of tax dollars and fees pouring in increasing every year. That those days, for the foreseeable future, at least for the next few years, isn't going to happen. So I looked at this budget that's collapsing, the businesses that are collapsing, people that lost their jobs or took massive pay cuts, and for me to walk away now, and I look at who else is on council, and I look at like even some of the other candidates, and I think nobody. I think on council, I could truly say that I really try to make sure that I didn't think of this like it's other people's money. Like, oh yeah, $1 million for marketing graphics, no big deal. We'll just approve it. I don't. I fight tooth and nail against it, because I know for a lot of people, the taxes they pay, the utility bills they pay. Some people are on fixed income. I mean, they may have a expensive house, but like a lot of people are barely here. I know, like my daughter's friends' parents. I mean, they both lost their job, right? And then like some of the council members are always saying, oh yeah, we should raise the utility bills. It's like, I mean, it's just, to me, it's unconscionable. And this is why I fight against this. It's because it is an expensive place to live, and not everyone here is rich. I mean, I'm not rich. I don't consider myself rich. And I know a lot of other people are struggling here. And so I hear that struggle, and this is why I don't think it's right to just look at the people that live here as piggy banks, where, I mean, there are some really rich people, don't get me wrong, but a lot of people are not that rich, right? And to just tax the heck out of them and raise the fees out of on everyone without thinking about like, how do we spend the money wisely, to me is not right. And so I felt like the second reason why I'm running is because I felt like now is the right time for someone like me to be here. Now, if we were just rolling in dough and money falling from the sky, okay, maybe, maybe being so fiscally conscious isn't so important. But now, when things are flipped the other way, I don't know if anyone else is better positioned for this, and nobody else has been willing to stand up to this like I have. And I don't vote against no against on everything. I vote probably 90% of the way times yes, but there's some stuff that's really out there, right, and really unconscionable, and and that I will rail against. I mean, we did a downtown street project. It was supposed to be a $10 million project, right, to replace the pipeline. The city did a direct reward for $18 million. Okay, so imagine you're gonna rebuild your house and you only get one bid. I mean, who does that? I mean, if you do that, it's not your own money, right? But if it's your own money, you're gonna get like 2 or 3 bids, right, to make sure you're getting a good price. I mean, it was so bad, that direct award, that the competitor contractor came in and asked, how come it was an open bid? How come we weren't given a chance to bid on it, right? And to me, I know staff hates me for it, but I work for you guys. I don't work for staff. I work for you guys, right? I work for the residents, for the people that live here, and I will fight for it, right? And I know staff hates me because I voted against the raises. I vote against their houses. I vote against their bonuses and, the car allowances, right? But I'm not there to make friends. I'm there to represent the people that live here, and that's why I'm running again, and that's why I think I'm the right person at this time.
Thank you very much, Greg, for this introduction. Let's just stay in this economic business realm. There are a couple of questions that are actually coming in, and one of them obviously is your vote against the last budget. Can you explain it a little bit better? Because that budget was a proposed budget cut. So yeah, after all you just said, that would have been right up your alley, right?
Yeah, well, I think
the second question that I have with that is, one of the main, and your competitors have talked about that plenty, and one of the main possible incomes could be a business tax. Mm-hmm. Yet you voted against business tax. Can you explain that and put that in the context of how you want to bring the city back?
Sure. Well, let's talk about both of them. So first, I didn't vote against the budget cut. What I voted against was, do we need to give raises right now? Is that a good thing? Do we need to keep these city managers so large? Do we need to have 5 PR people that cost us $1 million a year? Is that what we should do? Or should we maybe, we cut $3 million from our schools, right? So through the recovery transfer, we get to help the schools out. We transfer money from the city to the schools, and so to cut the school budget, it's like taking money from your left pocket and putting in your right pocket, right? It's the same taxpayer essentially, and so I didn't really think that was the right way of balancing the budget. The schools are also struggling, and a lot of people move here for the schools, and so I mean, I think the budget cut, and you probably saw that I thought that the $39 million like forecast for our general fund is probably about right, just based on the conversations I had with the hotels, which are 1/10 the occupancy they were before. It wasn't the budget cut. It was the fact that we prioritize having a management span of control. That means for every manager, there's like 3 or 4 employees versus I'm not sure if you guys know, but in most organizations, the span of control for managers like 1 to 7 or 8, right? Our city, we have a lot of managers, not a lot of workers. So like, is that the right thing to be doing? Is it right to be putting money? I mean, we're seeing very top of a very large city manager office. We have a incredible PR department, right? Which I think most people would say that money should be spent on maybe giving more money to our schools, or maybe not cutting our library hours as much, right? Or going to the workers that provide the services to our city. Maybe that's where it should go, right? Maybe it shouldn't go to the city manager's office, or to the city manager's house, or to PR people, or to $1 million for a marketing utility bill contract, right? So what I voted against is how we cut it, right? I think it wasn't cut. It was cut in some ways more in the interest of upper management in the city than than for the people that live here. And I especially don't like the fact that we have so many PR people in our city, because it protects the city manager. But the city manager really, I mean, it's not a political office, right? He's there to run and operate the city, to run the city. And by having all these PR people, it's basically he's having his own like political campaign, right? And so I really rail against like having so much money for upper management, for the marketing stuff, versus the services that people here actually use. So that's what I voted against, is because I don't think that in this time, if you ask people, would you rather have $1 million to have library hours extended, or $1 million to keep 5 PR people, like public relations people, employed so the city manager can make himself look good? Which would you rather have? I think most people would say, let's jettison the PR people, and let's hire more librarians. Let's keep the children's bureau open longer.
We had in the last couple of meetings, we had a question popping up that fits perfectly here. Sure. And that is, who do you think is running the city actually? Is it the city manager or the city council? And then we get back to the city tax.
I think what's happened is, while we're elected, right? So I'm elected, and if you guys think I'm a bad job, I just don't get elected again, right? So I'm directly accountable to the people. And I work for the people here in the city, right? The people living here. The city manager is appointed, right? And it takes at least 4 of us to make anything happen. And so the city manager actually has incredible control, right? Incredible power. He could call a curfew, right? He can. He has incredible power, and in my mind, maybe that balance of power should swing back more towards the council. I think this is why like on stuff that's truly outrageous, I will vote against it, even if I'm the only one. I'm okay with being the independent voice. I'm okay with pissing off staff. I realize that I'm not making. I voted against his help. The city manager got really mad at me. I was the only one that did it, right? He got super mad at me, really, really mad at me. But I'm not there to make friends. I'm here to represent you guys. That's why I'm here, right? I'm not. I have no other role but to represent the people that live here. And so, yeah, I think that especially in these constrained times, shifting the money from kind of like the frivolous stuff, especially the stuff that protects the city manager, like the PR people. Right? I know why he wants it, right? It's because it makes him look good. He could have fancy websites. He could hold, he could hold seminars and whatnot. That makes him look good. But that's not his job. His job is to make sure city runs well, to make sure your trash gets picked up on time, to make sure we don't have brownouts, to make sure that we don't have flooding, to make sure it's the operational side. It's not to insulate himself from the public, right? That's not his role, right? Because he's not directly elected. The council's directly elected. So I think the balance of power needs to swing back to the council, right? I think there's a little bit too much autonomy there. And I think the council needs to be more assertive. And I'm very assertive. I say what I think, because if I believe, and I hold office hours, I hold extensive office hours. And if I feel that what's happening is not right, I don't turn up a lone vote on it, right? And a lot of other council members want to go with the flow, right? They don't seem like a hard to work with kind of person. But for me, this is different than working at a company on a team, right? Where everyone's supposed to get along. This is a contact sport. We are here to represent the public, and we are here to push against things that we believe are not right, that are not right for the community. That's why we are here. We're not here to make friends. We're not here to be like buddy with the city manager and city upper management. We are only here to represent the interests of the public. That's why we're here. Right?
So let me jump towards the business tax now, because we're pretty short on time. And I just want to, we talk about it, what the question is, but let me just read a question that is from the participants.
Sure.
Susan Newman would like to know, unlike most cities in this area, Palo Alto does not have a business tax, yet Palo Alto is in need of additional funds for many important infrastructure issues. I respect your concern for and support of small business, but can you see a way to establish a business tax that doesn't harm the most vulnerable retailer and other businesses that are so important to the life of a city? So that is going back to that question, to the income side. However, you did vote against the business tax. Can you explain
not just me, right? So it was a unanimous vote. So I just want to make sure that's clear. So
Right,
all
but
seven
we
of
have
us.
you on the forum tonight. We want to know from you why
Yeah, yeah.
you voted against it.
Yeah, I know, but it wasn't, I think you implied earlier that I was the only vote, which is not true. It was a unanimous vote.
Um,
And it was a
Well, I
unanimous
didn't,
vote.
I'm sorry, but I didn't mean to imply on that specific thing. That was a general statement that
Okay. But
oftentimes.
no, the business tax I was not the sole vote on it. It
No,
was a unanimous vote.
right. Fair
I
enough.
think
Can you
I might have made the
explain to
motion.
us why you voted against it?
Yeah, of course. So, well, it has to do with COVID, right? So COVID happened in March. Um, you know, business left and right are failing. I mean, we look at the unemployment in our state, it hasn't been higher since the Great Depression, right? And it's looking like it's inching higher, right? You know, like look at Stanford Mall, it's shut down. You look at the business on Cal Ave and universities, they're struggling, right? Um, and um, it was a unanimous vote, right? I mean, I think it was clear to everyone that, um, I mean, there are times that you could get money from the business, but the businesses, if they don't, if they if they can't be properly shut down, right? That's the nature of business. And so you look at the people that live here, right? A lot of people here, like me, have to work, right? So you know they need a place to work, so they need income. And then you also look at the city. So a lot of our utility bills actually comes from business. So our rates for the residential is, I wouldn't call it low because I think we actually have relatively high utility rates, but compared to the commercial rates are way higher than surrounding cities, and for the commercial side. And so a lot of our relatively low residential rates are made up by commercial rates. And so for me, and wasn't just for me, but it was unanimous among all the council members. Now is not the right time. Now is not the right time when businesses are struggling. I mean, I know even, you know, the first people that got hit were the frontline workers, right? The restaurants, the retailers. But the people that are getting hit now are the second wave. These are the tech workers, right? So I run a little startup, and I know a lot of people in the startup scene. A lot of startups are failing left and right, right? It's hard to raise money right now, right? I mean, we saw the market flat, and 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 um, and so to me, it's important that if the businesses in our city are collapsing, right? It doesn't seem to be the right time to be enacting a business tax that's going to cause them even more hardships. You know, I was talking to one of the restaurant owners. He's paying like a $23,000 a month bill for his 3 restaurants in our city, right? This is utility rates, and then you know my colleagues want to raise the gas bill, you know, by 3% or something like that, and it's like, I mean, is
I
that
think
right? I don't know. Or do
I
you
think
want to
everybody
have?
means to
Sorry, what did
see
you say?
tax on the small business, but maybe you can enlighten us. My research says that that vote was taken in 2019. Are you saying that was taken
No,
during?
the vote, we had a lot of discussions. The vote to stop it happened, I think, in March or April or May. I forgot. It was after COVID, and
So
that's why it was
in
unanimous vote.
2019, you were for a business tax?
No, we voted. So we've had like so so for council meetings, we don't decide on things just one hearing. We have like, 5 hearings or 10 hearings, right? So we've had a bunch of hearings on this for, I don't know, for a while. And then the one that we decided to put on hold was, I think, in April or May. I forgot. You guys could Google it and find out. That was the final one. That was unanimous.
Yeah, I understand, but I'm trying to understand what your position was pre-COVID. Were you for or against the business tax?
The business tax in general, um, pre-COVID, I was very skeptical of it. I was concerned.
And why is that
The economy was slowing down.
in 2019?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not like it is now. Now it's a collapse, right? Now it's like the apocalypse, but it was slowing down then.
So even the big tech companies whose business did not slow down and who are the focus of this business tax with most candidates that we've heard, who didn't have the problems that you were pointing out, you were still against slamming a business tax on them.
Well, I think it depends on what kind, right? So I think it depends on the shape, you know, impact. So we did a lot of different studies, right? But we never took a final vote on it. I mean, we took a final vote on it, but it was not a fully defined business tax. But the final vote was unanimous, was to put it on hold.
I think we all understand the part where COVID comes in. I think we want to both understand what your general idea is and what you would do once COVID hopefully is over at some point. Well, let us move on to other topics because we are running a little bit short of time. Like I said, one of the biggest issues that here in Southgate people are concerned about is obviously the Great Separation. And I'm sure you know the different options that are on the table. We like to get your understanding of that, and also whether, going back to COVID, whether you see a need to actually slow down this whole discussion because things have obviously changed. Can you give us your take on that? And that also goes, I'll follow up with this with a couple of questions that are now coming in.
So I think the biggest issue really right now is how the heck would this get paid for, like the Great Separation? How would this get paid for? Because I mean, the state itself also is in pretty bad shape, as you guys know. I mean, the city budget, of course, is in bad shape. The state budget is also in pretty bad shape. So even if we had the perfect plan that everyone agreed with, how would we pay for it? Now, the hope is that maybe the federal government is going to rain money down on us, but I don't know. Maybe that'll happen. I don't know. So I think the second big issue is the ridership of Caltrain is a fraction of what it was. So that's down big time, and so it's I mean, electrification is still going on, but it's much more uncertain at this very moment. So I've had, I think, maybe 5 or more office hours on this topic, but I think those are kind of like the big externalities that are happening around this right now. Yeah, so, but, you know, in terms of the churchill ones, I understand there's, you know, the different plans and whatnot, and we could talk more about it if you want me to.
So let me just read a question from Susan Newman on exactly that. Yesterday, 6 of 9 ex-CAB members voted to recommend closing Churchill to City Council over a second option, the partial underpass, which preserves some travel options across the tracks. How do you think about the consequences of closure on traffic in North Palo Alto? What concerns would you as a council member prioritize in this difficult choice?
Yeah, I think my kind of thought around this kind of stuff is the greatest good. How do we get the greatest good? And so to me, it's like really trying to understand all the different perspectives. And this is one of the reasons why I hold office hours, because I'm trying to educate myself on the different perspectives. So there's an Embarcadero's perspective, like, oh my God, traffic, if it's closed and get pushed onto my street. There's the perspective of the people that are on Churchill saying, oh my God, my street's like a freeway, right? Cars go 60, 70 miles down the road, right? So there's lots of different perspectives, and I think all those need to be considered to figure out what is the greatest good. And so it's that's generally how I do this kind of stuff. Is I think about what is the greatest good, and the only way to understand what is the greatest good is to talk to a lot of people, understand their perspective.
Okay. If we don't have any more questions on the Great Separation, and I don't see anything else coming in on that, we'll move on to housing. It has been reported that you received financial support from numerous prominent developers. How does that impact your policies on housing, especially your decisions to support the building of office space, which most developers seem to prefer? And then we'll follow up on that, but maybe you can give us a general understanding first what your housing policies are and how those that financial support from prominent developers interferes with that.
Well, in terms of financial support, in terms of, you're talking about the donations, right?
I'm talking about, however you want to call it, financial support for your campaign from
Okay.
developers. Yeah.
Okay, so in 2016, I also got a lot of financial support or donations from developers. I also got that again this time. And I got money from lots of different people, actually. And that has zero impact on how I vote, right? For me, I'm a very independent voter. I'm not looking to like go on to assembly or House of Representative, you know, climb the political ladder here. I'm just here to make the city as best as possible. So what you have to do is look at what is my voting record, right? So let's look at the most recent voting record. So you probably know that I got money from a bunch of people who own property in downtown University, at University Avenue. And they were absolutely against the street closure, right? You guys probably read about it in the paper. Or at least some of you guys might have read about it in the paper, but I still voted for the closure. Why? Because I thought it was the best for the city. So, I mean, there was, like the Lynn Gateway project at across the street from the Alma station. Office building I felt was underparked. I voted against it, right? There was the housing at Coverly. Well, in general, I do support affordable housing. And having housing, next to playing fields probably wasn't, to me, the best idea. I thought housing should be on the adjacent parcel. So, I mean, for me, on kind of development issues, it's really understanding the greatest good. Has nothing to do with my donations, and my track record shows that I'm pretty independent in terms of what donations I get and how I vote. And I'd like to, if someone thinks otherwise, let me know, because show me what I did differently. But pretty much, I vote what's best for the city.
We'll come back to that donation questions a little bit later, but I would like to stay in the housing part first. So what is your idea on how to solve the problems that we're having in Palo Alto? As you probably know, you certainly know that there's a 3-to-1 ratio of employees to residents. And most of your competitors are, like I already mentioned, for building less office space. I looked on your website and all I found, I didn't really find a good position. You were just pointing at the median home value in Palo Alto. And then you said, I recognize the difficulty that many of our residents have in affording to live in Palo Alto, but there's no concrete position on what you would like to do in order to change that. Could you?
No, I actually think the issue, because I feel that for my own family, and I know a lot of other families here. I think it's really, it's affordable housing is certainly a big issue, but it's a larger affordability issue, right? I mean, we have some of the largest utility bills around, right? I mean, it's just very high. We have our food here is also very expensive, right? I mean, if you just look, I went to buy pizza and it was like $80 for 2 pizzas, right? It's like pretty expensive. Cost of rent here is also really high, or cost of housing here is also really high. So it's to me, it's an affordability issue in general. And I think, to me, the affordability issue drives out diversity, right? I think the diversity of the things that make Palo Alto. So for me, I'm looking at it more from the whole affordability point of view, not just one particular part of affordability. Like housing, one part of it, but also like your utility bills is also part of it, and the food's also part of it, right? And all the fees you have to pay is also part of it, right? So I'm looking at it from a very holistic point of view, not just one narrow lens.
So
I'm trying to help on all sides.
Yeah, I understand, but what is your concrete position on how you want to change the shortage of affordable housing?
Well, I mean, I voted for Wilton Court, which is affordable housing for family disabled. I supported the Buena Vista mobile home park for low-income residents. I supported the housing project on El Camino and Page Mill, which is kind of like smaller units. So, I mean, that's one way of handling it, right? But I mean, I think the bigger issue is affordability in general. But I think one thing that's helping with affordability, and this is very unfortunate, is this really deep recession. So, I mean, the house right next to me was listed at $3 million. It sold for $2 million. It's a 33% drop. So, I mean, that's already pretty affordable, right? The 33% drop, is, I think, a result of COVID, right? I'm not sure I'm not a real estate agent, so I don't know how that is for all the city, but I just know my next door house was listed at $3 million, but only sold for $2 million. Like, previously, these houses would like go above asking. This went like way below asking. And then I know that the rental rates are also dropping. So I'm not an expert in it, but this is what I'm seeing, and there's a lot of vacancies. So in terms of the affordable housing, the drop in our economy is going to is going to cause prices to drop, right? Just because of people can't afford it, right? So yeah, I mean that's going to help affordability, but it's a very unfortunate one because it's economically very painful for everyone. And I don't think that's necessarily the right way that we want to solve the affordability issue, affordable housing issue. But it's something that's already happening right now. It's just the general drop in the economic activity, right? And so you know, and like some of my neighbors, right, they've taken pay cuts, right? I've taken a pay cut, right? So that's, you know, just, yeah, so just the whole economic slowdown is going to cause it. I think what's happened is, you know, for 10 years we've been on this, you know, this incredible economic growth, and so, you know, it's been a really big issue. Right now we're on this other side of this peak, right, where the economic growth is like, it's no
I guess
growth.
when we talk about affordability, we're not talking about people who then, you know, jump in the air because the house that costs prior 3 million is now at 2 million. We're talking about people who really cannot afford even that. Look at me. So that brings me to a question. You're aware of all the trailers being parked on El Camino.
Mhm.
And that was in the other fora we had. That was one of the main questions we had. How would you solve that problem?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. So one of them is, uh, you know, there's the idea of like doing a safe parking area where the RVs can park. So this is a program that some other cities have done. We were just kind of getting started when COVID hit, where you provide, you know, caseworkers and try to get people back on their feet. But I think you have to look at what's causing the RVs, right? So I think it's not just people who are down on the luck. There are people who have RVs because you know, they couldn't get a cheap hotel room, so they come here during the week and they, you know, maybe work on at Stanford or whatever, and then they drive home, right? So there are people who use it as a temporary living when they're working here. There are people who are, um, you know, just truly down on the luck and have nowhere else to go, right? There are people who are, there's also like illegal activity, right? Like drug dealing and stuff like that. That's a whole nother set of issues. So there's different classes of why there are RV parking. I mean, there's um, uh, like why are there RVs there? And each of them, there's different solutions for them. So I've actually had quite a few office hours on this as well. So if anyone that's interested, you're welcome to go to my webpage, and we have a whole series of these on this very topic, talking to people about how do we solve each of these different classes. But yeah, each of them require a different solution. But if the question is why do we have a lot of RVs in, let's say, other cities like Menlo Park or Los Altos don't, it's one of the big reasons because we don't enforce our parking regulations. We have a 72-hour parking, but we don't enforce it.
That brings me actually to the next question. You have been voting for cutting the budget for the Palo Alto Office of Inspections and Enforcement, which could be the ones that have enforced that. And I want to tie that in with a question.
So Janet, that's not true.
Not true.
In fact,
I got
during the
that
budget,
question, so.
during the budget, I actually fought for it.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why I fought for it. Is because a lot of the businesses that like all the restaurants and other places that are trying to reopen, they're trying to you know, they have to do modifications, right? And so if there's not enough inspectors, they can't reopen. So I actually, on the budget, and I was successful in this, I actually got more inspectors. So I don't know where that question is coming from. It's not true.
Well,
I pushed for more
is
inspections.
Okay,
So
fine.
it's not
But
true.
let me tie that in with something that also needs enforcement, if you will, depending on what side you're on. And that's a question from James. He would like to know, if you're for traffic calming, what is your view of Castilleja's proposed expansion? And I tie that in with this question, you know, of enforcement. So.
Yeah, on Castellia, it hasn't come before council yet. Although I did have an office hour on it last weekend, and I'm going to have a lot more. And so I haven't fully formed my opinion on Castellia. I'm trying to fully understand this. And again, I don't go into these projects like, oh, absolutely yes or absolutely no. I know some people do, but not me. For me, I'm going to talk to everyone. I'm going to try to hear every single perspective. And if you go to my office hours videos, you'll see that I literally do this. I literally talk to everyone, whether I agree with them or not. I want to hear everyone's perspective. And the reason why is because I'm trying to figure out what is the greatest good. And I think short of doing that, you really can't figure out what is the greatest good. So I have to figure out what is the greatest good for this, right? You know, for Castanea. So you know, before like doing all my research, I can't pretend to know what is the greatest good. And anyone that does, I don't think is really doing their homework. So I will go out of my way to listen to all different sides and try to make one that's going to be in the best, you know, best for the city.
So just for the record, you are for keeping the enforcement office or the budget that supports the enforcement office, and you're actually for more enforcement, or how do I interpret that now?
Well, so I'm confused because you asked me that you said that I voted to cut the inspection, and I'm doing the budget side. I literally did just the opposite. So that's not true. I just so I'm confused by that. But in
That's
terms of
fine. We sometimes get questions that are not based on the truth, so I apologize
okay,
for that.
well,
I'm here to ask the question.
but in June during the budget season, right? Like the city, they cut inspectors, and I made the motion to get more inspectors, more budget for inspectors. So I don't know where that question comes from, but it's like literally the opposite of what I just did. So I don't know how to answer that. It's like, do you beat your wife? Well, it's kind of a weird question.
Okay. Good. Well, let's move on to the next thing, and I hope that at least is correct. There were recent allegations, and I would actually like to take a question and not use my own here, from Kathy. Please talk to us about the articles about campaign finance disclosures. You are getting a lot of attention for receiving campaign contributions from developers.
Yeah.
Please address the community's concerns about these developers' contributions and what they mean to you as a council member. We kind of touched on that, but there were recent allegations from an anonymous complaint to the California Fair Political Practices Commission against you, saying that you did not properly disclose the donations.
Yeah.
Can you comment on that?
Sure. So I'm not sure if everyone here understands what the FPPC is or what they do, but pretty much anyone here can file an allegation against anyone, whether it's true or not, and they will pretty much auto-generate a letter and send it to you and say, oh, you know, please answer this inquiry, right? So there's not an investigation, it's just an inquiry. And pretty much anything sent to any candidate will get sent off, whether it's valid or not. And so it's a little bit unfair that the press like prints it and publicize it, even though there's been no finding. And pretty much anything against any candidate, whether it's true or not, gets issued, right? So and so the allegation, and you guys may not be familiar with it, but the allegation is that I'm not allowed to raise money under my old 2016 campaign. But I'm not sure if any of you guys have looked at the FPPC manual, but it literally says in there, right, you're allowed to raise money under your old campaign. It says it like clear as day. So, but again, anyone could file anything against anyone, and an automatic inquiry gets sent out, whether it's valid or not. And from the PR from the legal point of view, I'm not that worried about it. But from the PR public relations point of view, right, it looks bad, right? It looks like, gee, you get it. But to me, it's kind of like this is, I guess, new age of campaigning, right? The way we campaign is we file anonymous. I mean, if it's so legitimate, why didn't the person put their name on there? Are they afraid? Is it because it's a bogus complaint? Is because they're just trying to make me look bad? And you're like, what's the reason behind it, right? If it's so legitimate, it's so valid that you can't put your name on it. You have to file an anonymous complaint that gets auto-generated, sent to me, it gets printed in the paper. I mean, so
Yet
like.
In 2017, you agreed to pay the FPPC a settlement for failing to identify several donors already. You already paid a fine of $700, or not a fine, it's an agreed payment of $733. So that was not an allegation, that was settlement.
This is settlement, yeah, and so let me explain what that's about. So that one, so there were so an anonymous complaint was filed against me after the election, and it had three complaints. The first one was you loaned your campaign money, which is perfectly legal, and the FPPC dismissed. The second one was you have a sign on the building. They said that's illegal, but the FPPC dismissed that too, but both of them were legal. It's okay to loan your campaign money. It's okay to put a sign on the building. Both of them are legal. The third one was that the titles that the titles that we put down on our form were not correct. And so what we did was literally what every other campaign does, which is we take whatever people write on the envelope and we put it down on the FPPC form. And so that's what we did. And pretty much every single campaign did that. And I bet you if you, but actually what the FPPC rules say is you can't just write down what people put on the envelope. You have to put them down what they're publicly known as, right? So it's a very detailed thing. So there were a few people where when we copied what's on the envelope and put it on the form, it wasn't what they're publicly known as. And so now what we do is we Google them. I mean, not donates, we Google them. And then we, even if, no matter what they write down in an envelope, we Google them and we put down what we find in Google, because that's what you have to do. But I tell you, I think a lot of other campaigns wrote down what people put on the envelope because that's the standard, right? And that's why the fine was pretty minor, is because it's a very common thing, and most people don't know that what you have to put down in your form is not what people write down or put on the website. It's what they're publicly known as. You have to do a Google search on them. And I think if you were to go through other people's campaigns forms and look at how many of the people put down retired when they were maybe emeritus professor at Stanford, they would also get a fine.
Okay, so I'm just looking at the time now. We have 4 minutes left, which is the perfect way to give you a last moment for telling us kind of the elevator speech, why we should want us to vote for you. And I'd like to pick up though on something that Abby Bradsky posted. And Abby, great minds think alike. That was exactly the question that I wanted to finish with. And she's saying, of the people running, which of the candidates do you want to work with on council and why? And maybe you can tie that into your last statement of why you want us to vote for you.
Yeah. So I actually think that a diversity of opinions is actually good, especially on a city council. And the reason why is because if everyone sees things from the same perspective, a lot of times, I'm not sure if anyone here ever watched the movie 12 Angry Men. I don't know, maybe. Okay, it's actually one of my favorite movies. And it's one of my favorite movies because in the movie, I think they're all ready to like convict the person. But there's one person who said, no, I think, he had no really good reason, but he just was being obstinate. No, I think we should, look at this more closely. And in the end, they realized that the guy was actually innocent. And for me, that, everyone having a different perspective and having kind of diversity of opinions on council is actually healthy, because I think we should have very vigorous debates to really make sure that we're doing best for the city. It's not good that we all think alike, we all vote alike. I think that's not good. I think it's actually healthy for us to have a diversity of opinions, for us to have fierce debates, and really try to make sure that we are doing the best for the city. So in terms of I can work with anyone. I mean, that's the honest truth. I have to do that all the time, even my day job. But I think on council, it's really good to have that diversity because everyone has a unique perspective that they're able to add. So I actually personally myself learn the most from people I really disagree with, because they have a perspective and a viewpoint that I didn't quite understand. So yeah, so that's my personal opinion. I know some people don't like conflict, some people don't like people arguing and stuff like that, but I actually think it's good. I think it's actually good, especially for a council to argue, right? And to try to get to the root of whatever the best decision is. So that's my viewpoint. I realize some other people like to have everyone thinking alike and everyone kind of getting along, but I actually think it's good, okay to have disagreement and fierce debates.
So which people would you like to have on your side to do that?
I want the smartest people possible, right? I want the smartest people who will do the most amount of diligence, that will work the hardest, that will really, not take a staff report on. I mean, this is one of my beefs. Also, is that we approve hundreds of millions of dollars on a consent calendar. So you guys might know what consent calendar is, but you can't comment on it. You can only say yes or no on it, right? This is where $1 million utility graphics contract goes, right? So it goes like these large expenditure goes on these consent calendars, like millions and millions of dollars, and you can't comment on it. You can maybe ask a few questions, but that's about it. And I spend a lot of time reading that stuff, right? Because that's where a lot of the money, that's where a lot of our taxpayer dollars are going. And it's not the most sexy stuff because frankly it's kind of dry, but I want people that would be willing to dig into this stuff, right? Really understand like where are the resources for our cities going. And I think right now, given the economy and this deep crushing recession we're going through, I think that's what we need. We need people that can dig into the details, right? Really make sure that we're not, spending $300 on a solo calculator you get for free on the web, or utility graphics, fancy utility graphics, or fight PR people. We need people who could dig into the details, really, and then stand up for what's right for the people that live here. Because I think, especially when you're on city council, there's a lot of pressure to try to get along, try to be friends with the staff, all that kind of stuff. But to me, what's really important is that we provide that skeptical view. We don't necessarily take things on like surface level. We actually look at it. I really spend a lot of time on these consent items, looking at it closely. A lot of times my colleagues are like, staff recommended it, so it must be good. Spend $1 on marketing on a marketing graphics. And to me, that's not acceptable. That's not what I hear. And this is, a lot of the time we spend a lot development debate, like, oh my God, should we do this development or that debate? But really, to be honest, a lot of the action right now is actually on the finances, on the what do we spend our money on? Who do we keep? Who do we lay off, right? And so I think a lot, especially right now in this time when the city revenue is dropping, that's where a lot more of the attention is going to be, is on how do we figure out, with the scarce resources we have, how do we provide the best services for the people that live here for the money that we have, right? I think that's, and so I think right now, because I don't think this is going to be a V-shaped recovery, and that's from where I'm reading from people, all their top economists, it's going to be a pretty hard recovery. It's not like we're going to have, if someone wants to build right now, trying to get a construction loan, trying to, like, in terms of the fear of like, oh, we're going to be in Manhattan tomorrow, I think it's going to probably be less because of this crushing recession that we're going to be going through. And so I think the bigger question is, how do we make the most for the resources we have? And that's why I stepped up to the plate again, is because with my background, I'm naturally frugal, right? Even for myself personally, I will do that with our city's money as well. I will spend it like it's my money, right? I'm not going to waste it. I'm going to make sure that if we spend it on something, we really need it. I'm going to make sure that we're not going to make the people that live here, make it even less affordable for them by raising our utility bills, right? By making it even more expensive for them to live here. I'm going to make sure that the people here, that staff works for the people that live here, right? Versus the other way around. That's what I'm going to make sure that we're going to do.
You heard the little ping. That was the end of our time.
Right.
I just want to tell everybody your website is gregtanaka.org. And anybody who would like to support you can go to that website and do it there.
And also, I realize there's probably a lot of questions that maybe they get answered, or questions you have of me. And I'm one of the most successful, if not the most successful council member. So anyone that's wants to chat more about anything, any topic in more depth, any gory depth, right? Any question I didn't understand, you're welcome to contact me. And I'll schedule office hours. And if you want it public, we can have it public. If you want it private, we can have it private. But I do this every Sunday. So happy to chat with anyone about anything. And so if anything that we didn't get a chance to cover here, please contact me and we can chat more.
Thank you very much for your time, Greg. Indeed, we do have a couple of questions that I didn't have time to ask.
If you could send it to me, I could try to get back to the person.
Okay,
give me the contact information.
Perfect. Yes, we will do that. And thank you so much for your time. You were really giving your best, your all, and we wish you good luck for your campaign. And still want to know those people that you want to be on city council with, but I guess we can't tickle that one out of you tonight.
Well, no, I'm telling you the honest truth. I want the smartest, most diligent people on council, right? That's important. And I think diversity opinions are really important. But I wanted to thank everyone for joining. I know it's time out of your guys' evening, but thank you for being civically engaged, and thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and good night, everyone.